Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another ship fitting guide for EVE Echoes from inside the Fulmination Content Creator Test server. Today we're going to be taking a look at another of the Tech 8 attack battlecruisers, this time around the Gallente Federation's Talos. Now this has been a very popular request. Apparently a lot of you like railguns, battlecruisers and Gallente ships, and I can kind of understand it here with the Talos. It's a very cool, very unusual, very futuristic looking ship, and it does do some really interesting things. So, what we're going to do in today's video then is have a look at what makes the Talos an attack battlecruiser, and then what makes it different from the other attack battlecruisers, and why you might choose the Talos over some of the other attack battlecruisers if that's what you're into. We'll then take it out, have a look at a couple of different fittings, and showcase it in combat toward the end of the video. If there is a particular part of this video that you want to see more than others, do be aware that there are timestamps in the description down below, but of course, if you skip ahead, you may miss some important details, especially things like giveaways. I've noted that a lot of you who watched the Drake video completely missed that it had a giveaway in it, so pay attention. Anyway, if you do enjoy the video, let me know by hitting like on it, subscribe to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, ding that notification bell so that you never miss an upload or a giveaway in the future, and of course let me know in the comment section down below what topics, what ships you want me to cover in future content. Finally as well, if you do want to go the extra mile to help support this channel, you can do so by joining us on Patreon. Details are on screen now, and we do have a merchandise store over at Redbubble, so if you've ever fancied representing the Catskill Academy, and there are plenty more designs coming soon as well, do head over and take a look. You get 10% off your first order if you are a first-time Redbubble customer. Anyway, that all said and done then, let's jump right into talking about the Gallente Federation's Talos. The Talos is the Gallente Federation's Tech 8 attack battlecruiser, so if we head to the Gallente Federation ship tree, up the battlecruiser branch to tech level 8, here is the Talos. Now interestingly enough, it didn't start life as a Gallente Federation ship. As per the unit's description here, ultimately it was designed by ORE, Outer Ring Excavations, the same people who designed the Retriever and the Venture series. If you like your mining, this was originally designed by ORE as a patrol craft for mining operations in lawless space. It starts to fade into obscurity, then the Black Eagles, a Black Ops branch of the Gallente government, come along, grab the design, strip it of non-essential components, and bolt on battleship class weapons, ultimately creating the first of the attack battlecruisers. It stays a military secret until YC-113. It's then introduced into the Gallente Federation Navy by Devol Labs. They modify it to fit in with Gallente Federation Navy standards. This then sparks all of the other empires to respond with the Oracle, the Naga, and the Tornado, their own attack battlecruisers. The idea basically is the biggest gun on the smallest ship possible. Now the Talos, I've got to say, I really like this design. I love symmetrical looking ships. The Talos is right up there with the Hurricane and the Oracle as two of my favourite looking battlecruisers. I love the propulsion unit array on this thing, those sort of details there on the top of the wings. It's just a really cool, really sci-fi looking ship. And actually, the Christmas skin, I'm normally not a fan of Christmas skins. You know, I'll be honest, I'm a bit of an Ebenezer Scrooge when it comes to the holiday season, but I really like this. I love that metallic red, that soft snow white, and then those electric green details. And of course, we've got the Christmassy green around the engine intakes there as well. Very cool looking design. I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of that sort of Christmas jumper patchwork here on the top, but if I ignore that and just look at the sides, the back of the ship, etc., I love how this skin looks. And if I were more of a battlecruiser pilot, I might actually be tempted to pick up a Talos just for that skin. So anyway, what makes a Talos an attack battlecruiser? Of course, it's that roll bonus. Big gun, smaller ship. Essentially, all of the attack battlecruisers have a roll bonus of a 95% reduction to the power grid requirement for large weapon systems of choice, and if that weapon system uses capacitor, as it does in the case of lasers and railguns, you get a 50% reduction to that too. So here with the Talos, like the Naga, it's a 95% reduction to large railgun power grid need, and a 50% reduction to large railgun capacitor need. Less capacitor required to fire this, and you can fit a full brace of large railguns on this, normally battleship class weapons, onto a battle cruiser. Now, interestingly as well, all of the attack battlecruisers use this same skill bonus profile as well of Advanced Battlecruiser Command and Advanced Battlecruiser Engineering. That means if you want to try out the attack battlecruisers, but you're not sure about which of the weapon types you like, you don't need to train into large weapon systems yet until you've tried them out, because they all get bonuses from Battlecruiser Engineering and Battlecruiser Command. Here in the Talos, that is a 5% increase to large railgun damage and a 5% large railgun tracking speed increase per level of advanced battlecruiser engineering. So if you've got battlecruiser engineering, advanced battlecruiser engineering all the way up to level 5, that's a 25% increase large railgun damage and 25% faster tracking speed on those turrets too. We'll come into what that actually means for the ship in just a moment, but ultimately this means if you are training into battlecruisers, as I said, you can go for the Talos here without any large railgun skills because it's getting bonuses from advanced battlecruiser, not advanced large railgun. Anyway, Advanced Battlecruiser Command then gives us a 5% reduction to our inertia modifier and a 4% reduction to signature radius. So at Advanced Battlecruiser Command 5, that's a 25% reduction to our inertia modifier, which makes us surprisingly nimble, and we can actually hold a fairly tight orbit with that. We accelerate and decelerate fairly swiftly. And we've got a 20% reduction to signature radius, making us a smaller ship, a little bit harder to lock onto, and a little bit harder to hit. Still a battlecruiser though, don't expect a speed tank anytime soon, but that does help mitigate some of the incoming damage. Now for me, if we're leaning into those roll bonuses here, we've got tracking speed, and we've got railgun damage, large railgun tracking speed, inertia modifier, and signature radius. To me, that suggests going for something that is up close and personal. When I look at skill bonuses, I want them to go into the weapon system that benefits most. So if you've got a choice between here, you've got railgun tracking speed. If you've got a railgun with a high tracking speed, that 25% is going to be 25% of a big number, which is itself a bigger number than 25% of a small number. That means for me, snub-nosed railguns are probably the option that we're going to go for here on the Talos because of that tracking speed bonus, because the inertia modifier means that we can maintain an orbit that little bit better, and we can get closer to enemy ships. We'll bear that in mind. We could still go for a large rifled railgun, but let's have a look at the rest of the ship first. Now the Talos attributes and fittings. It's got a fitting profile here of 1 drone tube. This can launch either small or medium drones. Do note that even though the Talos itself can fit large weapons, it can only fit small or medium drones. We get 6 high slots, which of course can fit those large weapon systems, 3 mid slots, and 5 low slots. And 5 low slots gives us a fair amount of options in regards to tanking or additional damage, that kind of thing there, alongside 3 power grid rigs and 3 mechanical rigs. We've got 960 megawatts of power grid output. That's not as big as the other attack battlecruisers, but it's more than we need for this particular ship and the different fits that we're going to put it with. Defensively speaking, 26,805 is not quite as tanky as some of the other battlecruisers out there, but it does the job nicely. 7,879 of that is in structure, 7,725 on armor, 6,404 on shield. This is a Gallente ship. They tend to be mainly armor and structure, not very good shields, and that is definitely the same here with the Talos. It's also notable that both the armor and the shield get additional increases to the damage resistances in regards to kinetic damage. Here 36.25 rather than the usual sort of 25%, and 46% rather than the usual 30% in regards to shield resistance. This means that if you're going up against Gallente or Caldari anomalies, or indeed Minmatar anomalies, you are that little bit more resistant thanks to having a decent amount of thermal resistance, a decent amount of kinetic resistance, and in regards to your shields, good amount of explosive resistance. That extra kinetic just helps you maintain a decent actual amount of survivability, especially against other railguns, which is kind of a key point there. Now if we then continue down and have a look here, signature radius 248.3, that is fairly sizable. Yes, we can reduce it by 25%, but 25% of 253 is still a big number, and sorry, did not mean to close the window there, and that happens sometimes when I accidentally tap the screen like a moron. Anyway, so yes, fairly large signature radius that we can reduce by 25%. That still creates a large signature radius. We're not going to be speed tanking, but it does help mitigate incoming damage. Flight velocity of 182 meters per second also is not terrible for a battlecruiser. Okay, it's not a hurricane, but then again, a hurricane's also getting bonuses to that flight velocity from its skills. But as far as Gallente goes, this is actually a fairly swift-moving battlecruiser. The mass and inertia modifier both combine to make it fairly maneuverable, especially once we take into account we get that additional inertia modifier reduction from Advanced Battlecruiser Command. That makes for a very nimble battlecruiser that's able to turn pretty tightly, accelerate and decelerate quickly, realign to a new target, that kind of thing. So we've got a fairly swift-moving ship, fairly nimble ship that can use large snub-nosed railguns and gets bonuses to tracking speed, but doesn't get bonuses to range. To me, that suggests that here we are going to be looking at snub-nosed railguns, not rifled. But we will talk about rifled in the fitting section as well. First up then, an up-close and personal snub-nosed railgun brawling build. This, of course, is leaning into the Talos' bonuses to railgun tracking speed, large railgun tracking speed. We are going to then be using large snub-nosed railguns. Basically, as I said, I would rather use the weapon type that gets the bigger bonus. Now, obviously, tracking speed between a large rifled railgun and a large snub-nosed railgun, it's the large snub-nosed that has the bigger amount. Therefore, the 25% increase is a larger increase for the snub-nosed than it is for the rifled. We don't have bonuses to range, therefore, snub-nosed. Hopefully that makes sense. Now obviously large snub-nosed railguns are the weapon system we've gone for of choice here, and ultimately for the Talos, core C-types do make sense for me, because ultimately no one really wants large snub-nosed railguns. Everyone wants rifled railguns. Snub-nosed tend to be ludicrously cheap, so you may as well pick these up. But also being a Tech 8 battlecruiser, I do want to showcase this in its best light possible, so of course all of the fittings are the highest meta level currently available in the game. Now, snub-nosed railguns do have absolutely monstrous DPS, 223. The majority of that, 918, is in kinetic, with 548 there on thermal. Now what we're then looking at, though, the downside of this is the optimal range of snub-nosed. 9km optimal range, 13.5km accuracy fall-off, means ultimately we are hitting 50% effectiveness by about 23-24 kilometers out. That is very close that we need to be in order to actually get a decent amount of damage out of these. And that accuracy fall-off then obviously drops to 0 very quickly beyond that. By the time we're hitting 37 kilometers, we're at 0% effectiveness, so you do really need to be close, hence so that we can get that optimal range and accuracy fall-off in there. But when you are that close, the damage is terrifying. 1372.09 DPS, and that is cold. That's before we activate our weapon upgrade modules in the low slots there. Now obviously, to get close to a target, we need some form of propulsion system. I prefer to go for a medium afterburner here, just because this allows us to actually, we can keep using this. We can orbit a target with this going as well. That said, you can use a micro warp drive here. Basically, with a micro warp drive, you power into the middle of the enemy fleet. You then sit still, you open fire with everything you have, and once everything's dead, you then power to range and do your thing there. It's entirely up to you. They're two different playstyles. One requires orbiting, one requires you just to sit there. The payoff on each of those is that if you're using the afterburner and keeping moving, then sometimes your weapons do have tracking problems. You just need to know how to deal with that, turn your afterburner off at the right times, or play with angular velocity to make sure you're getting the best shots, especially against smaller, faster moving targets. On the other hand, though, it does help mitigate some of the incoming damage, whereas using the micro warp drive means that you get into in and out of combat quickly, you switch it off so you don't have as many tracking problems, but you also don't get the benefit of being a moving target, so you do take more incoming damage. Both are options, both do work, and it's up to your preference and your skill training to decide which one you may wish to go for yourself. Now, because I'm going for the moving target approach, we do take a little bit less damage. Ergo, I'm going for a medium armor repairer and 2 adaptive armor hardeners. If you're going for the sit there and take it approach, I would swap out one of those armor hardeners for another repairer. You want to have 2 repairers working in counter cycle to make sure that you can actually repair all the damage that's incoming, because there is going to be a lot of incoming damage. I do it this way though for the moving target, because the additional resistances reduce the amount of damage we're taking. The armor repairer then obviously just repairs up the armor damage that we do take, what makes it past those adaptive armor hardeners. The fifth and final slot then, in the low slots here, I've gone for a magnetic field stabilizer. This of course increases the damage and reduces the activation time of any railguns fitted to the ship, 5% damage bonus, 4.5% reduction to activation time. You can then activate this module, and for the next, for me, 44 seconds, that will increase the damage bonus by an additional 9%, and it will reduce the activation time adjustment from 4.5% to about 16-17%, thanks to the 400% increase there. Makes 4 times as much activation adjustment down. Very big DPS increase, and I will showcase that later. For the mid slots, I've gone for a Predator Warp Scrambler and a Predator Stasis Webifier. This is for those storyline missions, or indeed just encounters in any other elites in any other encounter, especially the ones that have micro warp drives and can be a little bit more difficult to hit. The Warp Scrambler doesn't have to be a Predator. I know they are ridiculously expensive on the market. It's just the one I have here to showcase. Ultimately, once they hit that range, you activate the Warp Scrambler, bam, off goes their micro warp drive. That slows them right the way down there. The Stasis Webifier then drops them by an additional 61%, making a very fast-moving micro warp drive target a sitting duck for your railguns to track and blap. Now, yes, some people have asked why not target painters. For me, target painters are great if angular velocity isn't something you're taking into account as much. If you're going up against targets at range, then target painters seem to be a better option. They statistically work out better when they're at range. But I can put target painters on things that are fast moving close and still not hit them. Ultimately, if something is in range of a Webifier and in range of a Warp Scrambler, chances are those modules are going to be better than a target painter. If you have the option of having a Scrambler, a Webifier and a target painter, that is ultimately your best way of making sure that you can hit anything, but obviously here we've only got 2 slots because the third slot is going for a Vricolaarchus Large Energy Nosferatu. Yes, a large energy Nosferatu crammed into that power grid because of that optimal range. If we're going to be sitting at sort of 9 kilometers to 13.5, I want to be able to get as maximum effect as possible. Now, yes, a medium Nosferatu does have the range required for that, but I would rather be able to switch this on as we're moving between targets. As I'm approaching my next target, I'm still draining it with energy with the Nosferatu, and obviously being a large Nosferatu, we're getting 230 gigajoules transferred every 10 seconds, rather than the smaller amount, obviously, from a medium Nosferatu. It just helps us maintain that capacitor stability a little bit more, and you'll see that it is a very stable capacitor. We are above 50% stability with that active. Now, in regards to the drone slot here, obviously I've gone for a Vespa. This could easily be a Hammerhead. This could be any drone that you like, basically. The damage type doesn't really matter. Just go for a medium drone, something that's going to help you kill your targets. Again, this is just additional damage against anything that you're shooting, especially useful against those smaller, faster-moving targets like frigates and destroyers. Now, looking at the rest of the stats here, defensively speaking, 40,468, goodness, I can't get my numbers out there, total, 11,622 of that is on armour, compared to 9,806 on the shields, and you can see that the cold resistances there are already quite nice. By time we activate those armour hardeners, we're getting a much better response of things here. Let's then have a look at the rigs that help make this a reality. First up, in the combat rigs, I've gone for a collision accelerator on the railguns and a burst aerator. This is higher damage out and faster activating railguns. Yes, you do get more from 2 burst aerators. Burst aerators are a lot more expensive than collision accelerators, and you're literally looking at maybe 2 DPS extra. At which point you're spending 100 million extra for 2 DPS. To me, that's not worth it. So I go for a collision accelerator and a burst aerator. That, to me, is the more sensible way of doing things. The third option then is a nanobot accelerator. This is just decreasing the activation time, increasing the activation speed of the armor repairers. So they are activating here, as you can see, every 5.23 seconds. That just means that we are repairing more often. It helps us to deal with that damage. You could also go for bigger armor. If you're going to PvP, you could also increase the explosive resistance here if you're going up against a lot of explosive damage weapons, like if you're going up against Minmatar ships or against Yanjung ships, you may want to plug that explosive resistance hole. For PvE though, that explosive resistance hole doesn't really do much unless you're going up against missiles. If you're going up against Amar, or if you're going up against Gallente, you will do absolutely fine because they don't do explosive damage, so why would you patch for it? For the mechanical rigs, I've gone for auxiliary thrusters that help us move that a little bit faster, and a polycarbon engine housing here. This reduces that inertia modifier that little bit more. It helps us accelerate and decelerate that a little bit faster. If you are going for the micro warp drive build that I mentioned earlier, you may want to swap this one out for something like a dynamic fuel valve, or you may decide that you want to swap out the targeting system controller. I go for this. I like having targeting system controllers on these larger ships because it helps with the scan resolution. If you have a look here, thanks to these rigs, we've got a scan resolution of 406mm. That is actually pretty good. That's right up there with some of the better cruisers. It gives you a decent lock-in time on even the smaller targets, and since you're going to be sitting in the middle of the fleet, you do want to be locking on and opening fire as swiftly as possible. Navigation as well, thanks to those rigs, we have 300.3 meters per second. Cold, that's before the afterburn is activated, obviously. Pretty good flight speed there. Gives us a nice amount of maneuverability on the battlefield. Warp preparation time of 3.1. To me, that just makes a nice balanced ship that's got very high DPS, cold. You can swap out one of those armor repairers if you're going up against lower damaging sort of stuff for another magnetic field stabilizer. That will push your cold DPS well over 1400. It's about 1420, I think, when I checked. I just like having that extra little bit of survivability here. It just helps to, just to keep the ship alive. You can't do any DPS when you're dead, right? If you so desire, you can of course fit the Talos for long-range kiting combat. It's not as good as the Naga. The Naga does have bonuses to railgun range that help it do that, whereas the Talos doesn't have any range bonuses, therefore we have to accommodate for that elsewhere in the fit. Basically, what I'm trying to get at here is that if you want to do the long-range combat more, consider the Naga first and foremost. If you're more interested in the up-close and personal combat style, the Talos does that better. Now, both the Naga and the Talos can do long range, and they can do short range. Just the Talos tends to be better at short range, whilst the Naga tends to be better at long range. If you want to do a long-range fit here for the Talos, this is how I would suggest you do it. Now, obviously, the first and foremost consideration we need to make is changing weapons. You can't do a long-range build with snub-nosed railguns. No matter how hard you try, it's just not going to happen. So, of course, we swapped the snub-nosed railguns for large rifled railguns. Rifled railguns, of course, have that additional range. Optimal range here, 60.1 kilometers. Accuracy fall-off of 36.92. That is a considerable amount of range. It means we're almost at 50% effectiveness at 100 kilometers, and we can still comfortably hit our targets from 120 kilometers away cold. And of course, we make some considerations for that later on, as you'll see. That is a decent amount of range. The 60 kilometers means we're going to outrange most weapons, and it gives us a decent amount of time to blap any smaller, faster incoming targets before they become a threat to us. But obviously we do want to increase that where possible, and we do want to have some considerations to help destroying those targets a little bit easier. So the mid slots here, I've gone for 3 Halley target painters. These, simply put, obviously increase the signature radius of incoming targets. Now, the reason I haven't bothered with a stasis webifier or a warp scrambler here is because with the tracking speed of large rifled railguns being an absolutely pitiful 3.22, it doesn't matter. If a target is orbiting you, if you've got something like a Slasher 2 interceptor orbiting you at 5 kilometers, it doesn't matter if you scramble it, it doesn't matter if you put a webifier on it, you are still not going to hit it. Those turrets just aren't going to do a blasted thing. The aim here is to either destroy those targets before they hit that range, or to use your micro warp drive to disengage before they become a problem. You do need to be very aware of that. Can this ship do storyline encounters? Yes, it can, but you need to be aware of what is going on, and you need to prioritize your targets very carefully, very quickly. As someone put in my comment section a couple of days back, and I thought was absolutely magnificent, it might have been on Reddit actually, basically, stop looking at storyline encounters as the be-all and the end-all. Ultimately, about 90% of the community should not be trying to do storyline encounters. They're not ultimately the best way of making money for most people. You need to have a specific set of skills, a specific type of ship in order to achieve that, and for it to actually be a ISK profitable encounter compared to other things. Now, if you're running standard news encounters, some of these are 8 million ISK a pop, 8.5 million, plus bounties, plus loot, and you can finish those in half an hour with a ship like this, rather than the 150, 300 million ISK that you would get from doing a storyline encounter that's going going to take you 6 to 8 hours to complete, and is a lot riskier, and is probably going to get your 300 million ISK ship blown up. Think about what content you actually want to achieve. The Talos here is not necessarily best for storyline encounters, but it will do you in news encounters and PvP excellently. Basically, going back though, long tangent there, what I'm trying to say is you need to disengage before those like warp scrambling interceptors get close. If you let them get close, it can be game over by that point. The aim is to kill them before they reach that range, or to disengage before they reach that range, then come back and get them from a distance, and you'll see how we do that now. Now, ultimately, we've talked about how we have a 60.1 kilometer optimal range here as standard. This is thanks to having 3 Eagle tracking computers fitted here in the low slots. These are giving me an optimal range and accuracy fall-off adjustment of 17.19% and a tracking speed adjustment of 12.03. So yeah, the tracking speed we've got here of 3.22 is actually buffed by the 3 tracking computers. That's how terrible large rifled railguns tracking speed is otherwise. Anyway, you can activate these for an even bigger boost. You can get a much larger range boost for these when activated, and they activate for 10 seconds, and they have a reactivation time of 60 seconds. Now, the reason we have 3 of these is ultimately not to put all 3 on, although if we put all 3 on, we get some absolutely terrifying optimal ranges and accuracy fall-offs, but ultimately to cycle these. Fire one of them, activate one of them, as your turrets are about to fire. You've got a 10-second activation time, and ultimately the rifled railguns here have an activation time of 6.4 seconds. That means if you hit a tracking computer as you hit a rifled railgun, as your rifled railguns fire, you will get 2 shots off with that tracking computer active. Then as soon as it comes off its 10-second cooldown, just before the next turret activates, activate the next Eagle tracking computer. You'll get your next 2 shots off under that again whilst the first tracking computer is cooling down. Then when that one is off, as your next shot is about to fire, activate the 3rd Eagle tracking computer and you'll get another 2 shots off. This ultimately means you've got an almost 30-second period. It actually, if it's done properly, works out at nearly 45 seconds. It's about 42, 43 seconds of optimal firing, followed by a 17-second downtime. So the aim here is that you get 6 shots in a row perfectly within tracking computers, and by time that finishes, you'll get 1 or 2 shots that miss because they're not at optimal range anymore, and then your first tracking computer is cooled down, you activate it, by time that one comes off, the second one's ready for activation again, and the third one. So you kind of get 6 shots hot, 4 shots cold, 6 shots hot, 4 shots cold, and you keep doing that to maintain a good optimal range of nearly 100 kilometers, as I'll showcase later on. Now, this is actually ultimately capacitor stable. What you're looking at here in regards to the capacitor being 6 minutes 52 is based on having every module active. Now, if I were to uninstall all of my low slots here, you'll see that I'm capacitor stable. So with the turrets and the and the target painters running, this is capacitor stable. Considering that the micro warp drive is only going to be used to adjust our range, this is getting us to and from our optimal range and getting us out of combat a little bit faster. If we spot that there is a ship getting a bit too close, we can micro warp drive to range and then disengage, hopefully, before that becomes too much of a problem. But the idea here is that that is not going to be on often. We're only going to have that on when it's required. Now, we do have capacitor battery here that is increasing our maximum capacitor, and of course we can dump it in if we need a little bit extra juice as a quick point. But ultimately the aim here is that this is capacitor stable if we ignore the low slots. And if you're cycling those computers, then you should find that your capacitor actually recharges enough between those that you maintain capacitor stability. Again, that 6 minutes 52 is based on everything here being switched on at the same time, which nothing ever should. And if you uninstall the low slots, we do have capacitor stability. Ship is therefore theoretically capacitor stable as long as we're not activating everything in one go, as long as we're carefully cycling those modules. Now, the other consideration is here in the rigs. I have changed one of our power grid rigs for a railgun ambit extension. This increases the accuracy fall-off of those turrets. It gives us that additional bit of 20% accuracy fall-off to the railguns, which is that extra range, just helps out maintaining range. And I am going to showcase both these fits now. First of all then, let's showcase the kiting fit in PvE. So I'm jumping into Criminal Alliance, which is a Tech 9 Gallente encounter. This is, obviously it's one of the storyline encounters, 8 million ISK reward, plus bounties, etc. I've jumped in at 100 kilometers. We've got 2 Nemesis 2s, we've got a Talos 2, a Celestis 2 Covert Ops, and a Megathron. So we can lock onto all of these, and we are going to start here with those Nemesis. We're going to put all the target painters onto this. We're going to activate one of the tracking computers and our turrets, and you'll see that we one-shot that. We're now going to prepare to go up against the second Nemesis. Hopefully the turret will activate, aim at that target before the tracking computer goes down. It does so we're getting the extra range bonus there from having the tracking computer active. Now that we're coming here against the Celestis 2, we're going to activate the next tracking computer. You'll see the first shot there gets that bonus to range. We're at 84.85 kilometer optimal range. Second shot is on that same tracking computer. That fires off nicely, 3,500 damage for that strike. We're going to activate the third computer for this fifth shot, 3,800, and then the sixth shot from the third tracking computer here is going to be 4,788. Now, it's not quite enough there. We do run out of tracking computers. 60.1 kilometers we drop to for our optimal range, but obviously the shot is still damaging enough with the optimal range and fall off to finish off that Covert Ops Celestis. Now we move on to the Talos 2. You can see it's still outside of optimal range. We are obviously 61 kilometer optimal range, meaning we are 14 kilometers into the accuracy fall off, but we're still hitting for fairly decent damage. You can see there 3,070 damage. Tracking computer is about to come ready, so there we go, 85 kilometer optimal range. The Talos 2 is now inside the optimal, hence we get the increased damage there, 4,000 for that shot. Next shot hits for 3,901, basically 4,000 damage. Means if we're outside of the optimal range, we're hitting for 3,000 to 3,500. If we're inside the, if we extend the optimal so that we're now inside it, we're hitting for a good 4,000 damage. As I say that, 3,200 comes up as an option. Obviously, there is still a chance to get a weaker shot, but obviously the aim is to be extending that optimal range and the accuracy fall off, so that even here at 71 kilometers, they are still inside the optimal range thanks to that tracking computer. Blap, down it goes. We're now onto the Megathron. Now that Megathron is 70 kilometers away, that means it's 10 Ks outside of our optimal range, though again, because it's a large ship, we're still able to hit it for decent damage. 3,100, 3,200 is pretty standard at this point. It's getting a little closer, 69 kilometers. Still outside our optimal, but we're still comfortably within accuracy fall off. And you'll see I've activated there the capacitor battery just to help recharge that capacitor a little bit. Now, if you want to, you can theoretically drop that capacitor battery for another tracking computer. It does help you cycle that optimal range a bit better, but you will run dry of capacitor a lot faster. Remember, the capacitor battery is also giving me a flat capacitor, a maximum capacitor capacitance increase there. Just for having it fitted. I get that there. Anyway, we are now approaching to 60 kilometers. The reason I've just gone for 60 kilometers here is now I'm sitting at standard optimal range against a Megathron that still isn't going to be able to hit me. Set that there as the approach. That means my standard strikes are now in optimal range and we can clear this this wave that little bit faster. You'll see I've let the tracking computer stay off this time. I've turned off the target painters as well. Simply put, I'm here now just recharging my capacitor, preparing for the next wave to arrive. And as we start to get this Megathron a little bit further down, I am going to set an approach and move further away, aim to be closer to the 100 kilometer mark, just so that when the next wave spawns, I'm a little bit more distant, and I can start sniping off those smaller targets first. But we're going to let the Megathron get down a little bit first. Once it starts to get lower, 4,560 damage per shot. It's a good amount of damage per strike. You know, I've got to say, rifled railguns still do consistent damage. It's a nice feeling. Anyway, there we are. So we are now going to hit approach to 100 kilometers away from the Megathron, activate the micro warp drive here, so that we can start getting a bit of distance between us and the next wave that's due to spawn. Next shot is probably going to take this out. Oh, not quite. Good. Good, actually good. That means we can use the away to get a little bit further away. 56 kilometers away. There we go. I am actually going to double tap into distance now to just get a bit more distance. Although in fairness, actually, we're not too bad. We're not too bad. 88 kilometers away from the Nemesis, and that I should probably... There we go. Let's lock onto that one. Put the target painters on. First of the tracking computers. Blap, down goes that first Nemesis. Onto the second one. Oh, turn off the micro warp drive. Didn't mean to leave that. We have come out of range just a little bit. I wanted to ideally be at 100 kilometers. You can see there, without the tracking computer, we are not quite dealing comfortable damage, but being a small squishy target, it does go down fairly quickly. Anyway, now with this Corellum Catalyst 2, there we are, activate the tracking computer. So it's inside optimal range, 85 kilometers is the optimal range with the tracking computer active. That Catalyst 2 goes down in 2 hits, and we're on to the Celestis 2. And okay, this is basically how it's going to go now. We are going to keep activating those tracking computers to extend our optimal range, and thank you, lag, for making it so that that tracking computer didn't activate in time. That's wasted an entire shot. Wonderful, but there we go. That's the downside of this. If, like me, you're running on African internet and you do have high latency, there are occasions when you'll miss shots thanks to the tracking computer not activating in time, but there we go. Anyway, so all these ships, 95 kilometers away, you see we're still doing comfortable damage. Even without the tracking computers, we can still hit them. 940 damage isn't much, admittedly. We'll see again. Next shot here, what do we get on that one? 1842, so 1842. If we activate a tracking computer on the next cycle, you'll see we do get a bit higher, but I'm tempted actually just to let that Celestis 2 go down. There we are. Celestis 2 goes down, and we're going to move now onto the Talos 2. And when that turret goes to activate, hopefully, there we go, we get the tracking computer online as well. 99 kilometers, and we're hitting for 5,100 damage. So again, yes, the Talos can definitely do the long-range sniper kiting fit, as you can see here. I'm just blapping these as they approach towards me. What I am going to do is I'm going to finish this wave. Once this wave is finished, I'm going to turn around, dock back up at station, swap to the brawling fit, come back out and do the third and final wave of this. I think actually there's 4 waves, so third and fourth wave of this, just to showcase how the brawling fit compares. Here we are then, back in the encounter at wave 3, this time around with the brawling fits. We've swapped to the snub-nosed railgun brawling fit that we showcased before. I've warped in at 0 kilometers, and you'll see I am having a bit of difficulty here taking on this Nemesis 2. Being a stealth bomber, obviously, it's a very small signature radius, so what I've just done there is I've hit approach. I've got approach still set to 60 kilometers from the sniping fit. This now means I'm going to move in a direct line away from the Nemesis, and you'll see that means the angular velocity drops rapidly, and suddenly we're able to hit the Corelli Nemesis 2 there, and hopefully we'll take it out in the next hit or so. There it goes. Down it goes. We're going to move on to the Catalyst 2 Interdictor, and same thing there. Now, I'm not going to lie, when it comes to the brawling fits, obviously we are up close and personal with some very small, very fast-moving targets, and those frigates and destroyers naturally are capable of getting underneath the guns of large battleships. These are very slow tracking turrets. They do struggle against interdictors, against interceptors, frigates, destroyers, that kind of thing. So, I just have to be careful about how I manually pilot. Now that that's all dealt with, we've got one more Catalyst 2 to take care of, after which we are then onto the battleships and the battlecruisers and that kind of thing there, which are much easier to handle, and at which point I personally start to find that the brawling builder becomes that little bit more fun and beneficial. You struggle more against those smaller ships, but once those smaller ships are down, like you'll see now, suddenly you're capable of doing absolutely massive damage to the battleships and the battlecruisers. It means you can clear anomalies that little bit faster. Don't get me wrong, the long range is still very high damage, but here, if you're going with the brawling fit, you'll find that the amount of damage you can kick out is absolutely insane. And if you're the kind of person who's playing EVE Echoes with friends, which frankly you should be, this is an MMORPG, it does genuinely get better if you're playing with other people. Jump into a dead space. Take a Talos with a brawling fit into a dead space. That way you've got people around you who can help take out the smaller, faster moving turrets, because you'll see here, there we are, 1,748 with that magnetic field stabilizer active. Other people can take out those smaller ships. You are there to take out the big ships and to kick out some rather insane damage. You see how quickly that Talos 2 is going down here. That's without the drone active on it. Hitting for 1,300 damage, 28 damage, 28,000 damage, 2,800 damage. Crikey, how many numbers can we go through before we get the right one? Similar damage numbers to we had before with the sniping fit, but we are hitting them twice as fast. And that really does mean that those ships go down just that little bit faster. You see there, that Talos 2 has just melted away. We can move then on to the Celestis 2 Covert Ops. Again, very small ship, very small signature radius, being a Covert Ops cruiser. So we are going to move away a little bit. I'm going to set the actual orbit to 11 kilometers there. As we move away, we get that lower angular velocity. That's when our turrets kick in and do better damage. Once we start orbiting, you'll see that we start to do a little less damage because the tracking becomes an issue. We've got an angular velocity against them because we are orbiting at 690, 695 meters per second. They're obviously moving in their own direction as well. That does create an angular velocity, which reduces the amount of damage that I take, but also reduces the amount of damage that the Corellum Celestis 2 covert ops takes, because obviously covert ops ships lower signature radius. Turn off the afterburner. Let's see if that makes a difference. I'm also going to pull away, low angular velocity, I take it out in one hit. That is the difference between having an angular velocity with low tracking and having very little angular velocity and still being able to, you know, and just focusing instead on the damage. Take the angular velocity right the way down. That way the tracking low tracking speed can still hit. And you see that it does absolutely insane damage numbers. You'll see now as we go up against the Dominics, I'm hitting for 4,000 damage a shot. There we go. 6,465 from that one. And I think actually I do start to hit harder. I think I get a couple of 7,000s at some point in this, but nearly 6,000 damage a shot, and these are every 4 seconds. So again, that Dominix is just going down. The Brawling build does take a bit more work, I'm not going to lie. Obviously you do struggle against those smaller, faster ships. You do work better if you have someone with you who can just help in regards to those. But if you are in a team, if you're in a Dead Space, Inquisitor or Scout anomaly with some friends, then the Talos here with this snub-nosed railgun fit absolutely melts away some of the bigger ships and will really help your fleet take stuff down at ridiculously fast rates. It allows you to clear that content nice and quickly, which makes it very profitable. And there we have it, the Talos in all its glory. Now you can fit this in a brawling fit, you can fit it in a kiting fit. I personally find that the brawling fit does take a little bit more to make it work if you're playing solo, especially if you're in encounters that have lots of small, faster moving ships like you saw there with the Nemesis 2s, etc. But if you're in a fleet with some friends that can cover up for that weakness, or you're willing to have just that, be engaged that little bit more and actually do some manual piloting in order to take those ships out, I find that the brawling fit can be a lot more fun, a lot more engaging to actually play, and certainly it can clear content if you're doing it solo or if you're doing it with friends at a frankly frightening rate. You can really make a lot of ISK quickly by using that brawling fit, just because you absolutely obliterate enemy battleships and battle cruisers. If you are going for solo though and you want to have a bit more safety, then of course that kiting fit does give you those advantages. You can sit at long range, you can obliterate your opponents from a decent range without taking much damage back at all. Obviously, a little bit slower, you are having a lower income of ISK per hour if you're going for that sniping fit, but it's entirely up to you, and the wonderful thing about the Talos is that it can comfortably do both of those different fits. Hopefully that's given you some insight, some inspiration, given you some ideas of how you might like to fit your Talos. If you're considering the Talos, hopefully that's given you the answers you're looking for. Is this the ship you want to fly or not? Let me know in the comment section down below what you think. Which of the 4 attack battle cruisers is your favourite? Is it the Gallente Talos? Is it the Naga? I did enjoy the Naga doing that long range sniping fit that we had with that. The Tornado just seemed absolutely insane with the ranges it could get. And the Oracle, not only is it a beautiful looking ship, but I found it great fun orbiting round targets and melting them with lasers. Obviously, as some people have pointed out on that Oracle video's comment section, yes, you can fit the Oracle with beam lasers, sit at a further range like we've done here with the Talos. You use a similar fit there with the Oracle, and you can melt things from a distance, 100 kilometers away with lasers, if you're using those tracking computers properly. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. Otherwise, folks, thank you ever so much for watching right the way to the end. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!